morning, good afternoon, good evening. VP Chiwenga continues to make waves on social media with his continued attack on corruption and Zvigananda. Here is one of the videos that have been circulating on social media and has been making a lot of waves.
Kunavo vanenge vachiita vawandaka kune madhiragi kune vanongofuma achingonyuka kuti ndaane mari pano akaima mafactory kana mari dzakakuwandirai vanhu vaone mabasa. Akaima mafactory acho kuti vanhu vaone chi mabasa. Asi ndoda kuti kwamuri imi vechidiki hakuna munhu anochauya kuno achizovakira muZimbabwean basa, ringava refactory, ringava remumining, ringava muindustry, kungaa kutourism, kungaa kukurima. Ari kutouya kuzoswa kutorera zvinhu zvakachenda kusha kwake.
Well, there is some truth in that. There can be no denying that. I think the people of Zimbabwe should remember three things here. The number one point that cannot be denied, it is that ever since Mnangagwa took over in 2017, he has splashed billions, in my view. In an earlier version of that same speech, Chiwenga was talking of 30 million. I think it's a lot more than that. If you look at 2023 alone, Mnangagwa must have spent at least $5 billion from the millions spent busing the povho from one rally to another, feeding them with the sapatini chicken and chips, to the cars bought.
Tirimo mu State House titodya chicken in
Kule.
kudya uko kwakaprofitwa kare nababa John ndokudya kwakanzi sapatina.
Sorry about that. To the millions of dollars spent on buying trucks for chiefs and church leaders. And as you move up the scale, you come to MPs. They each received 40,000 US dollars, appropriately named housing loans. The deputy ministers received 230,000. Ministers, 500,000. Judges, a few weeks before nomination day, they each received 400,000 housing loans. Each. the amount of money that has been spent on buying votes or buying support is unbelievable. And one cannot deny that if that money was spent on development projects for the country would be miles ahead. The factories that Chiwenga was talking about there, there's no denying that. The second point that must be also be emphasized here is the very fact that we have got, the nation is stuck with this ZANU-PF dictatorship. Not just since the 2017 military coup, but ever since the country's independence, 1980, because we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections, and thus failed to hold the regime to account. That is at the heart of our problem. And in those 45 years, Chiwenga has played his role. There cannot be any denying that he is just as corrupt, incompetent, tyrannical as Mnangagwa and the rest of the ZANU-PF thugs. Here is Professor Ibo Mandaza spelling out the role that Mnangagwa and Chiwenga played in the 2008 electoral coup.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. He found Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns. I was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, you stay where you are. And then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away, no? So, yeah. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth.
And by the same token, I think it is foolish for Zimbabweans to now still believe that because Chiwenga has fallen out with his ZANU-PF colleagues, he cares about the ordinary people. He wants to see development in the country. He is against corruption. He's not. Chiwenga is not changed. This fight is a factional fight. He is saying some things that people want to hear because he needs their support. He has fallen out with Mnangagwa because Mnangagwa has reneged on the promise that he will step down and allow Chiwenga to take over. He has been part and parcel of ZANU-PF until this fallout. And if anyone thinks that he is not going to be a dictator, they are naive. There is no doubt that Chiwenga is a corrupt, incompetent, and murderous thug. He is determined to fight his way into power, into State House, by hook or by crook. And it is foolish for ordinary Zimbabweans to believe that he is a Democrat. It is therefore clear to me that for anybody who thinks that supporting Chiwenga is in the national interest is just as foolish as a goat taking sides in a hyena fight. Because you cannot doubt for 1 minute that whichever hyena wins, you would love to celebrate his victory with goat meat. I think the people of Zimbabwe should be smart enough to realize that repeating the same foolish mistake we made in 2017 will be unforgivable. Let Chiwenga have his fight. We have our own fight. And our own fight is the fight to end the dictatorship. As long as ZANU-PF is able to rig the elections, Zimbabwe will remain a pariah state. Our number one task is to fight to end the case of rigged elections and bad governance. And we are not advancing that fight by siding with a dictator like Chiwenga. Let's focus on what needs to be done. And in this case here, we cannot force ZANU-PF to stop the 2028 elections. Reforms, democratic reforms that should have been implemented, particularly during the 2008 to 2013 GNU, have not been implemented because MDC-CCC sold out. ZANU-PF has been rigging elections. In 2023, ZANU-PF blatantly rigged those elections. SADC and the AU election observers condemned those elections. And they would have gone one step further and denied ZANU-PF legitimacy. If Nelson Chamisa had not conned millions of Zimbabweans to participate, giving the regime legitimacy. That has been our problem. 2028 is 3 years away. We cannot stop ZANU-PF going into those elections. And we cannot stop Chamisa and company participating in those flawed elections for the usual a few gravy trains seats reward. What we can do is make sure that millions of ordinary Zimbabweans are not conned into participating in the flawed elections. If Zimbabweans do not participate in those flawed elections, ZANU-PF will not have legitimacy and will be forced to go to the GNU as happened in 2008. In the new GNU, we can then fight to get those reforms that the nation has been dying for all along finally implemented. This is not an impossible task. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.